Let the boy also push them away to the group.
In a vibrant Nigerian village, where the sun always seemed to paint the houses in shades of gold, there lived a young man named Jide, who was known for his strength, but also for his very sharp tongue. The village was a place where the trees grew tall, and the older people sat under the cool shade of the big Iroko trees to share stories and wisdom that had been passed down for many years. Everyone in the village knew that you must greet an elder with a bow or a kind word, because their grey hairs were like a library of secrets about life and how to live it well. Jide, however, walked through the dusty paths with his head held very high and a look on his face that suggested he thought he was much smarter than anyone who had lived before him. He would often pass by the old men and women without saying a word, and sometimes he would even make loud, rude comments about how their old ways were boring and useless in the modern world. His parents often tried to talk to him about his behavior, explaining that respect is like a seed that grows into a big protective tree. But Jide would only laugh and walk away to join his friends. One bright afternoon, while the village was busy with people carrying baskets of yams and colorful fabrics, Jide stood in the middle of the market square, feeling very proud of his new clothes and his fast way of speaking. He did not realize that his attitude was starting to create a dark cloud over his reputation, and the elders were watching him with heavy hearts, wondering when he would finally learn that pride is a very heavy load to carry. The sun was shining very brightly over the market when an old man named Pa Samuel slowly walked toward the center of the square, leaning heavily on his wooden walking stick that had smooth patterns carved into it. Pa Samuel was the oldest man in the village, and his face was covered in many lines that showed he had seen many years of both joy and sadness, so everyone always cleared a path for him out of great respect. Jide was standing right in the way, laughing loudly with his friends about a joke, and he did not move even an inch when he saw the old man struggling to pass through the crowded space with his tired legs. Instead of helping or stepping aside, Jide looked at Pa Samuel and made a very mean face, telling the old man in a loud and clear voice that he was moving too slowly and should stay at home so that the young and fast people could have the whole road to themselves. A sudden and very deep silence fell over the entire market as the women stopped selling their peppers and the men stopped talking, because no one had ever heard a youth speak so heartlessly to a person who was old enough to be his grandfather. Pa Samuel stopped walking and looked Jide directly in the eyes with a very calm but sad expression, while the other elders who were sitting nearby stood up slowly because they could not believe the great disrespect that had just happened in front of everyone. Jide did not feel sorry at all, and he even pointed his finger at the elders and told them that their time was finished, and that he did not need to listen to anyone who was not as strong or as rich as he hoped to be. The air felt very heavy and hot as the elders shook their heads in disappointment, and one of them warned Jide that a river that forgets its source will surely run dry very soon. But Jide just turned his back on them and walked away, while the villagers whispered to each other about the big trouble he was inviting into his life. As the days went by, a very strange and quiet change began to happen around Jide that he did not understand at first. Whenever he walked down the narrow village paths, the cheerful greetings that used to fill the air would suddenly stop, and the mothers would quickly call their children inside their houses as if a cold wind was blowing through the streets. Jide tried to go to the river to help the other young men with the fishing nets, but they all moved their boats away and acted as if he was invisible, leaving him to stand alone on the sandy bank with his hands empty. Even the market women, who used to offer him the sweetest pieces of fruit, would now turn their faces away and refuse to take his money, telling him that they did not want to sell anything to someone who had no room for kindness in his heart. He went home feeling very hungry and confused, but even inside his own house, the atmosphere was heavy because his parents sat in silence and could not look him in the eye after the shame he had brought to their family name. Jide sat on his wooden stool and tried to tell himself that he did not care about the villagers. The heavy silence in Jide's life continued for many days until a great challenge arrived that his pride could not fix, starting with a terrible storm that washed away the only bridge leading to the neighboring town where he traded his goods. Jide stood by the rushing brown water of the river, feeling very small and helpless as he watched his chances of making money disappear into the waves. And he realized that he did not know how to build a bridge or predict when the waters would go down. He tried to use his strength to move a heavy fallen log, but the wood was too slippery and the task was too big for just one person, making him realize that the elders often spoke about the patterns of the rain and how to build things that last. Later that night, a strange fever began to burn in his body, making him feel very weak and shaky, and he found that he did not know which leaves from the forest could heal him, or which roots would make the pain go away. As he lay on his mat in the dark, listening to the owls hooting in the distance, he remembered how he used to laugh when the elders talked about the medicine of the land, and now he wished more than anything that he had listened to their quiet voices. The darkness of his room felt very thick, and for the first time, Jide cried soft tears because he finally understood that being young and strong was not enough to survive the big problems of the world. He saw a vision of Pa Samuel's calm face in his mind and felt a deep sting in his chest, realizing that the old man's wisdom was like a lamp that he had foolishly tried to blow out, leaving himself to wander in the dark without any light to show him the way. When the morning sun finally poked its head through the clouds, Jide did not wake up with his usual boastful attitude, but instead he rose slowly with a heavy heart and a mind that was finally ready to learn. He washed his face with cool water and put on his simplest clothes, realizing that if he wanted to fix his life, he had to start by walking the long and humble path back to the people he had hurt. He walked toward the center of the village, but this time his head was bowed low, and he stepped carefully so he would not disturb even the smallest stone on the ground. He arrived at the big Iroko tree, where the elders were sitting in a circle, and even though his legs felt like lead and his heart was beating fast like a drum, he did not turn away or hide in the shadows. Jide walked right into the middle of the circle and knelt down on the hard, dusty ground, pressing his forehead toward the earth in a way that showed everyone he was no longer the proud boy who thought he was king. A big crowd of villagers began to gather, whispering in surprise, because they had never seen the stubborn Jide act so small and quiet in front of the whole community. With a voice that was soft and shaking, he called out to Pa Samuel and the other elders, begging them to hear his words and telling them that his eyes were now open to the foolishness of his ways. He stayed on his knees for a long time, ignoring the heat of the sun and the many eyes watching him, because he knew that saying sorry was not just about words, but about showing that his spirit had truly changed from a wild fire into a gentle light. The elders sat in silence for a very long time, watching Jide as he remained on his knees with his head bowed to the dusty earth, until finally Pa Samuel stood up and walked slowly toward him. The old man reached out his wrinkled hand and placed it gently on Jide's shoulder, telling him to stand up, because a man who admits his mistakes has already started to grow tall in spirit once again. Pa Samuel explained to the whole village that while the youth have the speed to run fast, it is the elders who know the way, and that a community is only strong when the young and the old walk together, hand in hand. Jide felt a great weight lift from his heart as the other elders nodded in agreement, and they welcomed him back, not as a bossy boy, but as a student who was finally ready to listen and learn the secrets of the land. From the Jan on, Jide became the first person to help the elders cross the road or carry their heavy bags from the farm, and he spent many evenings sitting at their feet to learn about the history of his people. The village became a much happier place because the music of the young people's laughter was now joined with the steady rhythm of the elders' wisdom, creating a beautiful harmony that everyone could enjoy. Jide realized that true respect was the most precious gold he could ever own. And as he looked at the bright African sun shining over his home, he knew that he was finally a real man who understood that being humble is the greatest strength of all.